So, welcome
Sort of.
everybody. Happy New Year. I hope you all had a good start in the new year. Before we start, I just want to mention that we have a new Parallax Media network where people can be invited and can meet other new people, get exciting free stuff. I will post the link in the description. So it's basically a mighty network things that's designed to and accommodated to, and
Yes, we are the mighty network of
yes,
Parallax. It's the
yes,
mighty
exactly.
network. And also we have a course with Luke Beckney on Gurdjieff, which begins this Saturday, which of the many great courses we have, this one will create within you the shock of being, because everything about Gurdjieff was about creating this kind of shock, the shock of transformation. So I can't think of a better thing for people to do in the new year than take our course on Gurdjieff called the hard way,
Mm.
because the easy way sucks anyway, and
The easy Protestant way, Andrew.
the easy Protestant way, yeah,
Yes.
just we don't
Because
need
like
that.
I think we need every now and then we need like proper shocks, to remind us that our notion of who we are and what the world is not accurate, and our little kind of grievances, it's just bullshit. And we need like homeopathic needle sticks or even a blunt force trauma to the head, with a baseball bat
Yes,
of a
that's what our
shock.
course will be like. So take it, okay? Come to it. Come and get your head now, because it will be also, there's love in there too. It's not just the hard way, but yeah, it takes. Gurdjieff has this statement, something like, "If you don't have a soul, bless you." Right?
Yeah.
Just have a good life. If you do have a soul, bless you, because you're going to bring soulfulness to the world.
Yeah.
If you are a soul in embryo, you're in trouble. So you
Right.
need the hard way, and I think that's accurate.
Yeah. Again, I really like the notion of a shock because I mean, like catastrophe theory, we need, periodically these kind of things that shake us up. And I mean, there has to be a correlation between the stuff that we can take and the stuff that we are subjected to. I mean, if you are like on
Hmm.
walking on eggshells, then you have a, real bad catastrophe in life. That's not so good. You have to be prepared to take a little more in than you can actually take. So you
Yeah,
have to wrestle with the chaos and you have to wrestle with the blunt force trauma
yeah,
and everything and with the shock. And then
yeah.
you
Also,
have a crisis and then you have growth, you
exactly.
know?
Yeah, I mean, yes. So the compassionate way is not to give people a trauma when they're not prepared for it, but this idea of conscious suffering is very very important in Gurdjieff. Like, if you're ready to become conscious of your own suffering,
Yeah.
then you can start to make progress, in your spiritual path. Whereas if you're not ready, then you can just have a good life, or you can just be like what Gurdjieff calls ape existence.
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
or he said, but there are people out there that are kind of interested in 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 going further in terms of their existence and meaning, and all that. And so that's the hard way for those people who would join us.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I was thinking about, Protestantism and all these kind of things because, I think you have in Buddhism, you have Tantra, but you also have, all these kind of different
Hmm.
spiritual strands of humanity, even Hermeticism, where there's like an affirmation of all things vile and, like sex and drugs and alcohol, where you kind of integrate it and where you kind of try to integrate the chaos and the shock. And so what I think about, like, what makes Protestantism is, the kind of avoidance of all these things. I think when I think
Hmm.
of Protestantism, I think of Martin Luther King and Obama. And when I think about, the in America, let's say, and when I think about the Afro-American subculture of Nicki Minaj and all these kind of things, Malcolm X, that's outside of Protestantism. That's something else, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I also the other thing about Protestantism is the denial of the feminine, which you find in Citric Buddhism as well, and most religions. It's just like this total denial of this the embodied reality, of birth and death that the Great Mother and represents. And also, so Protestantism seems to me this. I guess it was as a kind of a counterbalance to Catholicism, which had become so mother oriented, like mother and
Yeah,
child oriented. And as a reaction to that, you have Protestantism, which is just like strip the churches bare of any ritual, of any intermediary between you and God. And that's the ideal, but that's sort of radically destructive fundamentally if you don't have those thresholds.
sure.
So it's a question of, Alexander calls it the barred absolute. If you don't have these bars or a threshold or these periods where you can absorb the shock of being, as Gurdjieff would call it, then again, I think that is much of the problem we're seeing. Much of the innovation comes from Protestantism, like capitalism. Also, I mean, we don't want to be too facile in our critique of Protestantism because so much innovation and new creation comes from this movement, but also so much. I think it's so much trouble comes at the same time.
Yeah. But I mean, again, what Peterson said that, and I think it's true that the feminine or that this chaos is symbolized by the feminine, and so you have an avoidance of the feminine in Protestantism, and you have an avoidance of, the integration of chaos and pain, and, you create your walls and your way of life, and you try to hope that nothing bad happens.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's this Hegelian thing, right?
But there's no kind of way to really use all the, measures and tools at hand to transform yourself in the kind of way and battle with the dragon.
Yeah, well, no, I was going to say that it's kind of like if Protestantism comes on full on, then the New Age develops simultaneously. So there's Protestantism creates this sort of hyper modern capitalist sterile sort of world, and then as a counterbalance to that, you have just New Age, wacky New Age, devouring mother religions, as a sort of counterbalance. So that's what kind of that's what you see sort of in the United States and in places like that. You have sort of, on one hand, you have you have woke and then you have anti-woke, so you have incels versus kind of soft motherly New Agey religions, and both of those things kind of like the neoconservative movement, and then the these are sort of a result, I think, of not having a proper integrated religious, or ability to do tantric ritual to deal with those edgy, difficult energies.
Yeah, I mean, I was referring to Thaddeus Russell in his book, the Renegade History, and so for him, we are all kind of culturally Protestant. Although you might be religiously a Jew or New Ager or whatever, culturally speaking, especially the Americans, they're Protestants, and not only Protestants but Puritans as well. And so you have like this kind of unholy alliance between, Protestantism, Puritanism, imperialism, that we that the Americans have to invade, the Middle East to implicitly to bring the good message of capitalism, but the basic underlying ideas or meme is Protestantism and Puritanism. And again, and that's Thaddeus Russell's argument that you have in the black culture, there's a direct line between Barack Obama and Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King hated jazz. He hated he hated sexiness and all of these kind of things. And then there's a direct line between
But he
people
cheated
like
on
Nicki.
his wife, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's kind of the shadow thing. I don't like his critique of Martin Luther because I adore Martin Luther King, so I don't like that he's his critique of him. But I get the point.
Yeah, and then you have a direct line between Nicki Minaj and all these, rappers that kind of go outside of Protestantism, Puritanism. That a line that goes back to Malcolm X, and that was the main, mimetic kind of difference these two cultural figures had with each other. So Malcolm X wanted to establish like a black culture that is, outside of white America, while Martin Luther King wanted the black people to be assimilated into the white culture. And then you get people like Obama that are like so white, basically, in their work ethic and in their understanding of, how in their embodiment of Christian
So
values.
Protestant, so Irish. Well, I guess he was Irish, wasn't he? He was, but Protestant Irish or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I always liked, this tantric aspect of Buddhism, or even again like Hermeticism or Crowley's approach, where you have Crowley's tantric approach, where you say yes to all these things that lie outside the Protestant Puritan worldview.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I don't mean like taking drugs for pleasure or because you have nothing to do, but because you want a challenge, you want a shock.
Yeah. I mean, I think a cheap form of tantrism kind of pervades a lot of these things.
Yeah,
it's kind of cheap. Whereas, and also, if it's interesting. Like in the Catholic tradition, you have you drink the blood and eat the body of Christ at Mass, at the sacrament, and that is the most tantric ritual that you could ever possibly think of, right at the center of Catholicism, right? It's what could be more tantric than that? If you take it literally, right? If it's not just a symbolic thing,
No.
But if you take that fully literally, you have that, even in the conservative Catholicism. So I think that I do probably probably talk about tantrism too much, because it's usually there's a big, people use this word in all kinds of stupid ways. In America, like cuddling workshops and things like that.
Yeah, there's this movie Maestro which is great now on Netflix, and it starts with a quote, and I forgot who made the quote, and I can't really quote it, but the gist of it was that a great piece of art, so that's how the movie is introduced. A great piece of art consists not in unifying people and bringing them all together. A great piece of art creates diversion and creates conflict, because you have a new element that you have to contend with. And I think that's super important, that that we have to find a way to learn to live with things that don't fit in our particular worldview, and that makes us uncomfortable. And in the last respect, there is a beauty in enduring pain, and because, like, for me, again, Puritanism and Protestantism, that is also connected to this dogma of happiness, and I have to feel good, if I live my life the proper way, then everything is peachy and pink, and everything is good. I exaggerate, of course, a little bit. But there is
also the opposite as well, too. Everything is suffering, everything is heaviness, everything is just the cross, and there's nothing you can do, and just it's all in the hands of God and that sort of thing.
But that's not entirely...
I think they're almost two sides of the same coin, really. Like the early Puritan world denying, life denying thing that Nietzsche talks about, right? That aspect, which is just grim, this is just a grim perspective of the world and and that we live for the other world, for the afterlife. And then,
well, that was originally, yes,
but that leads to its opposite, which is just I guess Barbie or something, or just, just like Pink, as you say, it sort of the opposite would be a sort of gleeful hedonism that doesn't have any roots or any contemplation of suffering, as a reaction to it. So the two are sort of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy to formulate this in a very precise way, but everybody wants to feel good. Everybody wants to be happy now, with capitalism and everything. But I think there is a virtue in, like, I don't want to feel happy.
Yeah.
To be able to say this and to be able to endure, the inner turmoil and the conflict and the shock and the drama, and not necessarily drama, but I mean pain. We're not living in a cotton candy house, and you can live in your Puritan worldview where everything is in order, but that's not the world, and there is a virtue in the ability to endure pain. And this is what you do in meditation, and this is what you do when you really open yourself up to existence. It's like you have to at least to 40% to be able to always parallel process the pain of everything.
Yeah, well, Gurdjieff would call that being a man and not a dog.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is it's a sort of a stoic kind of, an aspect of stoicism, right? But yeah, but again, I think that gets co-opted as well. I mean, everything gets co-opted, everything gets
Yeah.
corrupted, everything that becomes a kind of a chauvinism or something. What was I gonna say? Yeah, there's something about no, I was thinking about I guess the Protestant move is sort of anti-ritual. It's kind of and this is, I think, and then what happens is there's this, the rituals are pushed into the unconscious mind.
Yeah.
And so I always had this kind of revelation at this conference I was at, where everybody was acting like they were at church, and there was no church anymore. It's amazing how all pervasive this, this is. You try to push away the various rituals, which are these threshold rituals, and then they end up, they end up operating unconsciously in you, because the whole point of these rituals is to become conscious of threshold, become conscious of threshold evolutions and thresholds and movements and all that. But if you just push that away, you end up creating something, far, far worse.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, I think I mentioned that before because you mentioned rituals. So I think it was George Washington who took the Bible and tore out every page that was not justifiable through a modern mindset. Let's say, it's like if the story was about Jesus walking on the water, then that's not compatible to a modernistic kind of secular mindset. So he put it out, and he just left the pages in that were like kind of still,
I think that would be a mistake, personally.
No, exactly, because again, you can argue, yeah, that's a mythic kind of approach, these old stories, but they convey so much conflict again, and so much, conflicting perspectives, and that they create kind of a dissonance to the modern mind, and in a way that's not bad.
It's good. I mean, it's good to live in a culture, right? Have stories and have rituals, and I think that this individualism of Protestantism that doesn't like that wants to believe that it can be sort of this, unique, singular, conscious mind, like this kind of supermind, kind of Nietzschean supermind that doesn't need any of that stuff. But then what you end up is you end up with a tasteless culture.
Yeah.
There's no it's like
Exactly.
It's you're eating like the kind of food you get in space. It tastes like nothing, right? It's just There's no taste to it. So you need the whole mythopoetic, even though the mythopoetic, we don't say it's literally true, but it is pointing to different truths that perhaps we don't understand yet, and so we can study these things forever and find different levels of meaning, and so it's also trying to reduce everything to one kind of meaning also.
Yeah.
It's a kind of absolutism, which is dangerous.
You need difference to have taste. That's the point, And so it's like I was watching this beautiful car crash, in the liminal web regarding integral theory, metamodernism, where everybody's like, you all do protest too much. Why do you have to rail against Wilber's integral theory again, and why do you infighting in regard of meta? It's like, no, why can't you let all these flowers stand on their own and enjoy them?
Exactly.
And see their different offerings. Why do you have to rail again and again and again about Wilber? I mean,
I got the answer to that question, why people do that. It's very simple.
They're Protestant.
No, because the son wants to be better than the father all the time. He always wants. It's like
a daughter. Yes,
it's a totally masculine. Well, it is. It's less of it. I think it's less in the feminine realm.
Well, there were prominent females that rail against
Wilbur. Yeah, that's definitely. But maybe they have good reason, and sometimes, and whatever. It doesn't matter. But I think what I find in these online spaces, because they are so sort of sterile and intellectual, these kind of stupid arguments that people get into, it's always like this. Like I saw that today on. I just opened up Facebook, and I saw another article about how Ken Wilber failed.
Oh yeah, that again, the rise and fall of Ken Wilber.
The rise and it's like give me a break. He didn't fail. He created so much. He made mistakes, but who doesn't? Get over it, guys. It's obviously a young guy with a narcissistic ego who wants to be better than Ken Wilber in some kind of a way, or is resentful against his dad. It's always that. It's always the son who wants to be better than the dad. That's really intense. People should look more at that, because that's where all the resentment comes from. And then you could create a whole fucking, like the guy who wrote that article has books out, and he created a whole platform based on his wanting to be better than somebody and his resentment.
Well, that's not entirely true.
It's an exaggeration, but that's often people.
Mark Manson, he wrote books that have nothing to do with Wilber and resentment. It's just like the art of not giving a fuck. That's not a bad book. That has nothing to do with resentment. But
I bet you if you get to the bottom of his philosophy, just from the article I read, maybe he does some good books too, but if you get to the bottom of that philosophy, it's probably not as deep as Ken Wilber's. It's probably pretty shallow.
Yeah. I mean, the point
even if he's a good writer,
the article is 10, maybe even 12 years old, and that the people again use this as an incentive to rail again against Wilber. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? I don't understand. Why do you have to do this? And I don't think it's just boys. There are lots of women that do that too, that have like a dick envy or something, that they have to try to put Wilber down. And I mean, like, you can do this with every philosopher. You can do this with Sloterdijk, with Wittgenstein, with Nietzsche.
You can do that with
everybody. As soon as you have an articulated perspective as a philosopher, then you are excluding everything else, and you can play this game with Schopenhauer, Hegel, with everybody. It's like, but
you need a scapegoat to build your philosophy.
Why do you do this with
you need a scapegoat to build your philosophy on? It's very simple. Like, you build your philosophy on the resentment of somebody, being better than some person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the same,
because you feel inferior deep down. You feel inferior. Like, that's why these people because they're inferior to Ken Wilber in terms of accomplishment, in terms of breadth of ideas, in terms of all kinds of things, that they are inferior in that level, and they're trying to be better, and so they feel this inferior complex, and people don't want to be less than any. This is a kind of another Protestant critique, because everybody
Yes.
wants to be the same. Nobody wants anybody to be better or smarter or more gifted. Instead of saying, "Wow, thank you for your incredible gifts that you've offered to the culture," you want to bring that person down, right?
Yeah.
To your level, because people don't like any kind of vertical hierarchical difference. They want to flatten everything out into a sort of, it's Wilber's basic critique of green, isn't it? I mean, that's perfectly.
I mean, again, there's
You can't argue with his critique of green. I mean, it's just a perfect critique.
I mean, it's just what the perfect Shakespearean sentence. Methinks the lady doth protest too much. And I mean, the funny thing is that Wilbur doesn't do anything publicly, or like very few things, and the people come back and come back and come back compulsively
Compulsively.
to put him down. And it's so funny. It's like, yeah. And why do you need this? Why do you need that your thing? Why do you promote your thing as no? It's not you who decides that your thing is better. It's culture that decides.
You just do your thing, and then let culture decide. Yeah.
Culture decided that Wilbur is, in a certain position on the societal hierarchy. Let's put it like this. And this is not something that he decided. And so when you go with your meta-modern model and say, oh no, this is my model is better and Wilbur should, no, it's not you who decides that. It's society. And as long as you don't accept that, you're like driven by resentment. It's like you can have a scientific or like an academic argument, and this has been done, but to go again and again on Facebook to have this city, and
the argument is always that Ken Wilber is not political enough, which is like he didn't address this issue, he didn't address that issue, he didn't talk about this war or that war, he didn't. So basically, I translated, he didn't feed into my own particular narrow ideology of the way the world should be. So therefore, I mean, he did have lots of political things to say, but and everybody, not every, he can't be God. He can't know everything about everything and say everything about everything. And, it's just so silly. It's like, oh, he's not political enough. It's like, you're too political. Like you can only think in terms of, dichotomies or good and evil, and right, in a narrow sort of like, this is good, this is bad kind of way, right?
I have to say, and I try to allude it to that, in the article I recently wrote about the meta crisis. My honest opinion is that the Americans are shit at philosophy, generally speaking. It's like, okay, you have your integral thing, you have your meta-modern thing, whatever. Like, what about Agamben? Have you ever read Sloterdijk or any of those Europeans? It's like, if you read these people, you automatically kind of develop a perspective that you can taste the flowers and the fruits of all these different people and take the best and leave the rest to itself. You don't have to be, focused on one thing. It's just like, and
well, maybe you're scapegoating Americans a little bit, because there is the Pierce and the Whitehead tradition, and there is the kind of I wouldn't call it an American thing. I mean, it reaches its apogee, is that the word I'm looking for, of shallowness in a certain kind of American culture.
That's what I mean.
But I think there is a great other side of American culture.
No, let me shit on America, please.
Yeah, well, you're European, so you have hidden animus towards America.
No, that's
like most European German philosopher types. Yeah, and we have, of course, inferior complex towards Europeans, and we think we're better, and it's like it's always like that. We're just like that.
You know where you see it most?
Where?
Because the obsession of the Americans with big dicks, it's like, oh no, he has such a big dick, and it's like you see it everywhere in every movie. Oh, that's the guy with the big dick. But then you look at charts, size of dicks compared to countries, and so the Americans in medium have the one of the smallest dicks. So,
on average, they do. Yeah.
yeah. Only
this is an area I have not investigated or done any research in. And I see that you've done quite a bit of research in this area, Tom. You seem to be an expert on this subject.
The Chinese have smaller dicks than the Americans in general.
Yeah. Yeah,
and that's the resentment. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Well, does size matter anyway? Yeah. I mean, I guess it does.
Like what Austin Powers' father says, no? It's like the comedians always tell the truth. So Austin Powers' father says, it's not the size that matters, it's how you use it. No?
It's how you use it. It's not the size that matters. But it's also, there's also like the in Tantra we talk about the inner, outer, and the secret.
Yeah.
So the outer would be like how big, physically your dick is.
Yeah.
And then there's the inner, which means how big a dick you have, how big a dick you have, like metaphysically, and then there's the secret, which is like,
I mean, it's like, okay,
I can't even talk about it. It's the secret.
Let me shit a little bit more about the American philosopher. So there's this video about the meta crisis, 3.5 hours long, and I'm not mentioning their names, but it's. If you look at the comments, it's like, oh no, that was the most useless 3.5 hours I spent in my life. So the people finally getting caught up, like they understand that it's just empty words, really. And so, these kinds of things that, I was thinking and rethinking. It's like what Germany has, CO2. What do you call it? Like the expulsion, which is now more or less than in the 50s, like similar, like in the 50s. So we don't contribute
because they got rid of nuclear energy or something like that. Mm-hmm.
No, not nuclear, but we kind of, we have this new kind of technologies, and our CO2 expulsion is very low. America is one of the main drivers of CO2 production and climate change, and in all of these talks about, the meta crisis, and it's like, no, you're doing this. Start cleaning up your own room instead of preaching all of us about the impending doom of the meta crisis. Maybe you should start to clear your act up, and then it's not our problem to fix your turbo capitalism and your crazy way of American.
Well, aren't they making a critique of that? I don't really get your.
No, I never heard that the American philosophers say, oh no, it's like we have to change something. Actually, it's like, no, it's a global meta crisis. No, it's not. As Europeans, we have different problems that we have to contend.
Oh,
guys.
There's a lot. There's tons of anti-American Americans. In fact, they're the biggest anti-Americans there are Americans.
I'm just saying, it's like turbo capitalism. The birthplace is America. Of turbo.
Thank God for America for that. Thank God for I say saying this to upset the people who are have so much animus towards capitalism. People just have animus, right, towards whatever. Yeah. It could be capitalism, it could be communism. They just have a lot of animus, and they have to express it about this and that. So,
I see you don't want me to rail on about the meta crisis, but you're right.
No, because yeah. Well, no, it's because I think the conversation is. I think you've made the critique. The critique is good, but if it becomes a railing on, then you're just then there'll be just something for somebody to critique you about. They'll be railing against Tom's shallow critique of the meta crisis, or just like so and so.
You said shallow.
Shallow critique of no, I didn't say your critique is shallow. You have tons of legitimate points, but that could become another thing, So I guess part of my psychology is when something becomes a thing, I kind of I push back a bit.
Yeah. I mean,
even
the
if
thing,
it's something that I thought last week. It's like I was saying that last week, and then you're saying it. Now I'm disagreeing with you.
yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Because I mean, again, it's like because all these kinds of disputes, even on Facebook, they extend to the larger world as well. They're like there are fruits and flowers in Gurdjieff and Crowley and the meta crisis and every kinds of philosophy. But you have to taste the buds and enjoy them, and then you have to leave them be in a kind of way. And I always like that approach
Hmm.
to to all these things. I don't get the infighting really. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, it's strange. I found that strange too. When again, I told you about that last time about when I was sort of promoting this course on Gurdjieff, and I brushed against Gurdjieffians who are just having violent discussions with each other on Facebook. It's like,
Yeah,
why did you even read Gurdjieff? Are you doing that?
yeah,
Why are you doing that if you've read Gurdjieff? I mean, it just tells you the power of that animus, of that need to argue and dismiss and crush your opponent, and it's just like it's so powerful.
yeah,
It's so, again, and it's so trivial usually, right?
yeah. I
It's
had
so
basic.
like the discussion is always so trivial. It's like so and so just thinks they're right about this one little stupid thing and has shut down every other possible avenue of discussion.
Yeah, I had a
Mhm.
similar. I had a similar experience basically. So a year ago, no, it was no, last year. So a big publishing house came to me in order to give to create a new translation of the book Toth from Crowley, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that one with the cards and everything.
Yep.
And I mean that's one of the most well-used tarots in Germany. I would say maybe even worldwide. But I was very proud that they got the job basically, and and that was in cooperation with the American OTO, the Ordo Templis Orientis, so the corpus of
Oh, the
crowd.
purist in that
Yeah, no,
particular
yeah.
realm.
So
Yeah,
and so
got it. Yeah.
then it became interesting because the previous translation had obvious mistakes in it, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I was aware of that, and so I created this new translation where I tried to fix those things, you know. And then I got into via that publishing house into contact with the head of the Auto, William Breeze, and we talked about these things, and there's such an orthodoxy and a tradition
Yeah.
within that structures that the mistake even though the mistakes are recognized,
They
they're
don't
not
want to change them.
exactly, because
Wow.
I mean it's a very weird thing. It's like because it is what it is, and because it's part of the thing, you can't change. I mean, I did incremental changes,
Yeah. Just
but there
not to
were
shock the people. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
but there were like heavy blunders that when the old because the old translation came from the 80s or something. They didn't have the internet, and so there were like some interpretation. So you can now access dictionaries in the internet from, let's say, the beginning of the 20th century. So when that book was created, and then you can see that some words had back then different meanings that they have now, and
Right.
so
Right.
now
Right.
you can account for that. So
Yeah.
you have, but they don't want to change these things.
No,
You
they
know, you
don't.
can,
Yeah, and I have something to share too about that. It's like the whole thing between Ouspensky and Gurdjieff, right?
yeah,
Ouspensky was the guy who basically popularized the teaching of Gurdjieff
yeah,
with his book In Search of the Miraculous. And Ouspensky created all of the different slogans that Gurdjieff students always repeat, like "Man is a machine," and what's the other one? Yeah, like we should engage in conscious suffering, things like that have become cliches within the Gurdjieff movement.
yeah,
And I was listening to this other guy. He's saying everything that became orthodoxy within the Gurdjieff work people came from Ouspensky and not from Gurdjieff. And actually, this was Gurdjieff's sort of teaching at the time, which was very context related.
Yeah.
And in his later teachings, everything he said that the exact opposite often of what he said before. Man is not a machine. Obviously, man's not a machine. It's born from eggs, and it's more like
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
seed. And so literally, it wasn't true, but he was just saying it as a teaching method. And all those people in the Gurdjieff movement take it to be literal fact because Gurdjieff said it. Whereas
Yeah. Yeah.
he was saying it, and Uspensky took it to be a literal fact, and went and the interesting thing is there's always the founder of this movement, right? And then Ouspensky came and started his own thing and rejected Gurdjieff teaching. He
Yeah.
thought that the Beelzebub book was a bunch of nonsense, right? And that was supposed to be that's according to Gurdjieff his whole teaching. It's very, very interesting that all the things that the people in the Church of Gurdjieff believe are actually things that were updated by Gurdjieff, and sometimes there was a 90 degrees change in what he was thinking in his later career. And then so these people are saying, oh no, you got to find the real Gurdjieff. So everybody's looking for the real Gurdjieff. Does he exist? Who knows? It's a good question. I mean, there'll be a new orthodoxy of what Gurdjieff really meant, and that keeps changing, it would seem.
It's absurd. I mean, it's like, who doesn't develop in one way or the other? It's like the joke from Bill Burr. It's like, if you have a guy that, says now what he says for the last 9 years is like without changing their opinion, it's like, that's an amazing run. You don't find these people that don't change over an extended period of time. It's like the shit I said 10 years ago, even the shit I said yesterday. It's like you develop. You. That's the whole game. You kind of formulate and say the things you want to say, and the preciser you say them, the faster you get to the point where you change your opinions.
Yeah.
And so,
and it is only words in the end as well. That people have to be able to see through the language, because I think people get trapped in language egregores, or they get stuck in sort of systems of language, and that affects how they see the world. But often for a guy like Gurdjieff or the Zen masters or different teachers who are often trying to push you beyond the mere languaging of the thing.
Sure.
Yeah, so that you're not stuck in the literal interpretation. And then you always have people who just take everything completely to the letter and don't understand the context or the nuance or the situation in which the language and stuff has been created. Then they become orthodox, whatever, orthodox Lacanians, orthodox Freudians, orthodox Jungians, orthodox Gurdjieffians. In every single realm, there's people like that who take the thing itself and create a simulacrum of it, and then live within that simulacrum.
Yeah, although I would say that there is like a tight connection between, I'm not making this up. This is, Worf, I think, that you have a different language is always connected to worldview. And as soon as you change your language and your mode of describing things, as soon you change your worldview, like incrementally. You can't, it's like that's Wilber's whole argument that, if you start to speak the integral language, you start to change, your consciousness fundamentally. So it is a tool. And that's a postmodern recognition that language is not only language. And again, as soon as you formulate your thoughts in a very precise way, then you formulate your worldview, and then you approach a moment where you have to confront your worldview and your language in a way that transforms it again. And so you're in this perpetually autopoietic kind of circle. That's why writing and speaking properly is so important.
Yes, but I don't think that's the whole of the experience, right? Which is very much what Gurdjieff was talking about, having three brains. I think postmodernists get caught in the language realm and say that's all there is, but there's also the body realm and the emotional realm and we're the three brain creatures. We're not the one brain. And it makes sense that language is sort of is your filter about how you kind of perceive your part of the world, but not all of it.
No, that was that is what I was what I am thinking about a lot. So, like, what do you do, for example, if let's say you have a, how do you say this, like a proper postmodern model of the world, a theory, and let's assume that is a proper postmodern theory, like we call it X, but then your way of addressing and describing that model X is modernistic because it's rationalistic. It rests on the subject object differentiation, and it rests on nominalizations. Like, for example, a sunset. There is no sunset. It's a nominalization of a process of Earth rotations and movement. There's not necessarily so you have the same thing with waterfall. There is no waterfall. There's water. It's a normalization of a process of water rushing down a cliff. And so what do you do if you have like a model X, but approach it with a nominalization, right? And then you enable certain perspectives, but you limit other perspectives.
Right. I got it. Yeah.
And so that was the whole idea of postmodern philosophy, to deconstruct everything, not only the models, but also language patterns. And that's why you get these all wild, crazy ideas from Guattari and the postmodern philosophies that are way more poetic than, the purely rationalistic, scientific way of approaching the world. And so...
Well, Gurdjieff did that better than anybody.
Yes, exactly.
I mean his first book had the explicit... It says, right, like he has 3 series of books. In the first book, you're supposed to read 3 times. Beelzebub and his thing is, he says, it's fantastic. He says, I even have it written down here. He says, the purpose of this book is to deconstruct every single truism you have about the world, deconstruct the whole thing, break down every kind of, that was the purpose of the first book, and it's written to the unconscious, and it's a wild science fiction novel that makes really no sense to the conscious mind. But you have to allow it to kind of penetrate your unconscious, and then you read it once normally, and then you read it aloud, and then it has a very specific function. Right. And then his next series of books is, okay, now you're ready to begin the creative process. Once you've deconstructed the whole. So I think there's better sources than Guattari and Deleuze and even Lacan, but that's my own prejudice, bias.
No, I would say it's different. It's from different areas of life. You mean like Gurdjieff is not a proper philosopher. Guattari, Deleuze were proper academic philosophers, and so they created, languages and modes of describing things that were outside of the normative way of doing philosophy, and that's great. It's like again, and
sure.
And then there's the question. Because all this postmodern, metamodern, integral, performative stuff is just coming up, it's just bootstrapping itself up. There has not been an emergence of an equivalent language mode to, describe and approach these kind of theories. They're still made up from a modernistic, rationalistic, nominalization, operative kind of mind. Yeah, and so. That will be very exciting when we see new language modes coming up to create and describe and approach, metamodern, integral, postmodern realities.
Yeah. I guess that's what philosophers do, or that's what. Yeah. Yeah. It's just. I don't have the faith, perhaps, in that. Maybe I'm kind of a reactionary at heart. I'm kind of like. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think so.
I'll go back to Gurdjieff, because
I don't think so, Andrew.
That's got gravity, whereas all this made-up stuff.
I don't think so, Andrew. I was talking with Brenton Graham Dempsey about this, and he made the point that you can do a lot of stuff via poetry, and you just published, this kind of beautiful poem about the Red Queen. It's like you can use poetry and poems in a way that facilitates and uses language in a way that is outside of the normative way of
Yeah, in fact, you have to. I think, in a way, like you have to be
in a way,
poetic,
yeah,
because
yeah,
if you don't poetic, then you get stuck. You get stuck in verbal formulations of reality, which are reified, crystallized, or you know, narrow. Whereas this is why you need you need to write poetry, or you need to read poetry, or you need a poetic view of reality, so you can subvert and upset those and that could become an extreme as well, and you become this sort of flaky artist, with no grounding whatsoever, and then maybe you have to go back and study a bit of philosophy. So I think there's, again, like, to use the metamodernist word, there's an oscillation.
yeah,
At least I see that in my own, creative process. It's like, okay, so in the beginning, I wrote a lot of songs and poetry, and then I felt like I couldn't articulate what I felt and thought and about reality, and so I had to start writing in a more prosaic way. And then after that, I'm done with that process. I want to go back to the more, the more like poetic mode, because the poetic mode is almost the opposite. It's upsetting the tables of whatever is going on. It's kind of opening a doorway to a wordless space, or something like that.
Yeah. Also, there are different ways of doing this. What I always kind of liked was the approach of George Spencer Brown. I don't know if you've read it. It's a very important book, Laws of Form. And so he developed a new kind of mathematical calculus, basically, right? And so what you would expect is a math book, basically.
Yeah.
But what he did was, and he was basically the first who did it, was to correlate that with acts of cognition. And so the book starts with injunctions like draw a distinction, make a difference between a unit and a background. And so and then he correlates that and puts it, to the side to mathematical operations. And that book was so influential that it influenced the whole of systems theory and constructivism and all of this, because he broke up the language pattern and the modes of describing something and created basically some form of process thinking in systems theory, and it's super interesting. And so you have to, and I imagine something has to happen for any postmodern kind of endeavor, that there have to be new language experiments, and then again, well, to find this, to cycle back. And you can't do this if you're like confined to a Protestant Puritan kind of worldview, because you have to challenge that whole thing, to get exposed to new ways of living.
Yeah, well, maybe part of the Protestant spirit is a challenge to what the reified modes. So again, I don't want to make too much of. I do make a thing of it, because I fundamentally agree, but. What I was thinking about as you were talking, is I was having a conversation with a friend of mine last night, and she was talking about feeling oppressed by AI, right? That by the fact that AI is coming in and it's just going to make us all like robots or something. We're going to start to imitate the AIs, and there is that sort of doomer feel of, oh, gee, here comes this mind-numbing technology, and I said, no, the fact that it's mind-numbing and mechanical, it's like this gives us now an opportunity to go back and write poetry again. So this is what I'm feeling about that, is feeling like what is pushing me to want to write poetry again is this Moloch, of technology. And so you can often like say thank you to the Moloch, and because that's like, okay, now we have this kind of a freedom. So when the cultural landscape is pretty Moloch like, or pretty, just to look at the leaders of this world, the politicians, and it's just like, there's nothing going on, there's no Martin Luther Kings anywhere, or anybody who has any charisma whatsoever. The whole thing, and then the world is run by all these tech gurus who are totally autistic and probably, whatever. Then oh, this is a great opportunity. We're free. We're so free in this time to do whatever we want. We're so free to do these things, these experiments, because nobody's going to burn us at the stake. Nobody. We're not even going to be canceled anymore. It's like you have all this freedom, so it's a very great time to be alive.
I think women have the propensity to feel oppressed.
Perhaps. You're in trouble for saying that, Tom. They're going to come after you. You're in big trouble. Yes. You have to watch out for the castration cults.
Yes,
they were very big in Crete.
49 years of existence taught me that women like to feel oppressed. Sometimes
they like to be like.
Sometimes they have like a sexual thing going on, Then like push me down, but lift me up. But yes, push me down, but then lift me up. It's like this, Hegelian kind of thing. It's like, they like that. They like that. I'm telling you this.
They like to be the damsel in distress and be rescued by tall German guys like you, Tom.
No, well,
tall German philosophers.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's just one of these things, They need to complain, and they find something in order to.
Yeah, complain. But all the guys are women too these days.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all just like women. Yes. They all complain in the same way. You can't blame it on the women because the guys.
Yeah, but
are
in order
worse.
to complain, you need to feel oppressed. That's my point.
Yeah, all the guys feel depressed. They're all doomers.
Oppressed.
Yeah, oppressed. Yeah, I said didn't I say oppressed? Yeah,
you said depressed.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Well, I was talking with this friend about the movie Barbie, and she was saying that in the movie Barbie, actually Ken is the girl, and Barbie's the guy. Barbie's the sort of like in the traditional masculine thing. Ken is the objective one who's just watching what's going on
that's
and
true.
kind of going through it. It just like in the end just does whatever is necessary. And Ken is the one who's like, look at me.
Yeah.
So it's like I think we're living in a culture where all the guys are really women and all the women are really men. That's the culture we're living in.
Yeah. Dogs are boys.
So when you make a critique about, don't worry, everybody, if Tom is making an anti-feminist critique because he's really talking about the guys.
No, I'm talking about girls.
Yeah, no, but they're really the guys are worse. The guys are worse.
Yeah,
the guys are much worse.
Cuttlefish.
The guys just want to be cuddled all the time and go to tantric.
No, you know the cuttlefish, no?
The poisonous thing that you.
No. I think it's called cuttlefish. So when you have like a swarm of fish and the males are competing against each other for the female fish, and then there's like, and so you don't get to the female because they're all like scrambling, and then there's like one male fish that kind of exhibits female traits. And so he imitates the female, approaches her and inseminates her in a kind of way.
But that's all the guys these days. They're all like that.
Yeah.
They're all cuttlefish.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, guys, man up a bit. As Gurdjieff said, be a man and not a dog.
Get a shot. Get a life. Get a life, you pussies.
Yeah, this is the thing. Gurdjieff. Somebody said, "Why do you like?" I live in this house in Avon, next to Gurdjieff's grave. At this house with a garden, and somebody asked Gurdjieff once, "Why don't you live in a nice house with a garden near Avon? And why do you spend all your time in Paris, in these noisy cafes, which are?" He said, "Because I'm a man and I'm not a dog." And I was saying, "Okay, I guess I'm a dog because I live in this little house with a garden."